You're listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner, your source for investing made easy. Here's Andy Tanner.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Academy podcast. I'm Andy Tanner, your host. This is where investing is made simple. And you'll notice that on our show, I bring in a variety of guests. We have guests from all the different asset classes, from commodities to paper assets to real estate, oil and gas, gold. We also bring in a lot of people in personal development to help us improve our lives. And people notice that I very much love to speak to people who study how the brain works, because that's the machinery we use to make decisions. And I often feel that it is underappreciated how important it is to understand the psychology, how emotions play, how our cognitive blind spots play into money. Money's an emotional thing. And so today, I'm stoked. Today, we have Joy Lere, and she's a psychologist. And she focuses on the intersection of our behavior in business. And so it's a merger of how money works in our minds. So she's got a very narrow focus here, which is exactly what we like to talk about. And so this is going to be an exciting thing, and particularly with COVID-19 and how that's affecting our minds. And so I'm looking forward to a great discussion here with Joy Lere. So Dr. Joy Lere, thank you for being on the program.
Andy, it is wonderful to be with you here today. Thank you.
This is going to be exciting. So first of all, what makes a person decide, I think I'm going to be a psychologist, and furthermore, I think I'll study how this affects people's decision-making in business. Give us a little bit of your background and what led you to want to become an expert in this field?
Absolutely. So I have a very varied background. As an undergraduate, I studied communication and PR and theater and psychology and biblical studies. And I had the opportunity to obtain my master's while living in the UK for a couple of years. And it was there that I first dip my toes into clinical work and absolutely fell in love with it. I think sometimes the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, which is a good sign.
Yes.
So I was really craving more, and I was not really be done with academia. So my husband is in the military, so while he was finishing up a tour in Iraq, I hopped back across the Atlantic and obtained my doctorate while living in D.C., and that was just fabulous training. And then I started my clinical career at that point, and it was something that just, I tell people I have one of the best jobs in the world. I get to sit behind closed doors with very intelligent, motivated, driven individuals who are having conversations with me that they are not having with anyone else in their life. So that was really the focus of my clinical work. And it was interesting because over time, it wouldn't matter what the presenting concern was, which would bring someone into my office. It became clear that money was a part of the picture. And when we step back and think about that, I think that makes a lot of sense. I say to people, money is a little bit like food. You can't not have a relationship with it. You are interacting with things that either directly or indirectly are related to your financial life every single day. This is not something you get to opt out of or unsubscribe. People have to figure out how to have a relationship where they are managing their money or it manages them.
Yes.
And the power that money has on people's psyches, on their relationships, is really, really tremendous. So this, I was noticing this theme emerge, and I was struck by that. And I've been someone who, throughout my life, has always been really interested in business and finance and entrepreneurship. And I then had the opportunity to transition what I'm doing now, where I work really focused as a consultant in the finance industry, helping people in the financial services space understand the complexity of their clients' money lives so that they can better connect and do the work they need to do. Because the truth is, finance is a lot more than numbers. It takes more than math to help people really be set up for success in their financial futures. A lot of those things aren't necessarily taught alongside of economics in the ivory tower. So there's a growing field of behavioral finance that is really, really exciting. So that's what I get to do today, and I absolutely love the work that I get to do.
You know, one of the advantages of podcasts and the technology we have is there's a button that allows us to go forward 20 to 30 seconds and a button that allows us to go backwards 20 or 30 seconds. And I would encourage everyone, if you have that technology, if you're not listening in your car, to just hit that back button and just listen to about the last 30 seconds of what Joy just said. Because what she said is there's more to this than economics and numbers. And there's a tremendous personal development, a cognitive behavior that needs to be developed. And as an educator I've been doing this for almost 30 years now. And I got to tell, it's not just I just cannot agree with more emphasis, more strongly with this element. And to set a little context, we're going to get into COVID here in a bit and how that's affected people's psychology. We'll certainly get to that. But even if COVID didn't exist, this is a major thing. And I'm going to speak from my experience. Maybe you can psychoanalyze me or what have you. But I'll tell you what my experience has been as I've grown. One of the things I've discovered is that the machinery that I used to think is imperfect. And there's these things that I believe can be called cognitive blind spots or cognitive traps, that things that we might not necessarily know that our subconscious does, that we have a duality inside us, a minimum of two people. I know my stomach thinks a lot for me too. When I see that Ben & Jerry's, I'm thinking with my stomach, right? Yeah. So there's some people go with their gut on things, or some people have their heart speaks to them. So there's a big duality that if I was Mr. Spock, I'd be a better investor, for sure, if I was Mr. Spock. But I'm more Dr. McCoy-ish or Captain Kirk-ish. So I like to talk a little bit about the cognitive traps, that understanding that the machinery used, if you go back to a microbe, we felt, from an evolutionary standpoint, we felt before we thought. In other words, we said, oh, this is good, I can eat this. Oh, this is bad, it'll probably eat me. And we didn't think things through so much as we just said, this tasted good or this didn't taste good. We are very much still have that limbic reptilian system in our brain that makes us do things that we're not even aware of. So cognitive blind spots is a good way to start. And then the idea of emotional intelligence, that if I can be more present and more mindful of the flaws in my machinery, then I can take a breath, and it doesn't necessarily remove the weaknesses of that machinery. But if I understand that, look, I'm a human being dealing with flawed machinery. It's not a perfect, I'm not going to make perfect decisions all the time. Then I can begin to develop practices and habits that can become a check and a balance. And I have my opinions on that, but I didn't have you on the show to talk about my opinions. I want to hear about your opinions on these cognitive ideas, emotional intelligence, and let's lay that context before we get into COVID.
That sounds great.
What do you have to say about my machinery? You've known me for a little while now. It's pretty bad, isn't it? It's pretty bad. Let's just start there.
No, I am not. Okay, here's our first lesson on the couch. We aren't splitting things as good and bad.
Thank you.
And actually, I think something that's important, because I think there are a lot of messages out there, even in the language that is used within the finance industry and economics, this idea that people are irrational or they are misbehaving. The truth is, because we are human, we are just playing out our money lives. And it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. There are a lot of factors that really impact what people do, when they do it, why they do it.
Yeah.
Humans, it is a complex calculus of someone's personal history, their emotions, their cognitive thought patterns, and ultimately the actions and decision-making that create their financial reality. Now, something important that you brought up that I think a lot of people can relate to and wrestle with is this idea of, I know the right thing to do. And I've always, when I work clinically with patients, I'm like, you're smart. This experience is not going to be something you can get from a workbook for $14.99 on Amazon.
Yes.
This is so too much. You can sit here and tell me all the right things or all the things, quote, you should be doing, but there are things that really get in the way. So it's really important. Part of the work that I do, part of the work that financial advisors do, is helping people bridge that gap between what you know and what you want to do. And we really want to close that space. But it is something that is very, very difficult to do, and a lot of that has to do with that equation of those factors working sometimes very much against us.
Just to remind everyone, we're speaking with Dr. Joy Lere. Her website is JoyLere, that's JoyLere.com. And you mentioned something about knowing what to do and doing it. And in my life, I've been working on a book about this, that there's been a couple of gaps. And you talked about filling a space. There's a gap often when I look at mistakes I've made financially, things I wish I could do over again. Sometimes there was a gap between ignorance and knowledge. I was delving in an asset that I didn't understand, and every once in a while I've gotten it over my head where I didn't have the knowledge. But I'll tell you what, most of the mistakes I've made have not been the gap between ignorance and knowledge. It's been the gap between knowledge and behavior. And I make fun of myself in a friendly way here, because my wife always says, Andy, there's about 30 pounds on you I'm not legally married to. What happened over the last 30 years, right? And my major in college was exercise physiology. So there's not really a knowledge gap here. There's no knowledge gap. I pretty much understand that Ben and Jerry's is not the thing I should do. But the gap between what I know and how I behave, that seems to be the one. And when you said earlier, it's not just knowing the numbers, right? It's that gap between what you know and those moments of choice where you've got an angel on one shoulder, a devil on the other, or however you want to phrase it, maybe not good or bad, but right and left instead of good or bad. You kind of say, well, I think I should probably go to the right, but I feel like I should go left. I go with my gut too often, maybe. I don't know, but this is the type of thing you mentioned. You don't buy a book for $14. Coaches help with this, right? Professionals help with this. Getting someone like yourself to coach you and to help you can go a long way in solving that second gap. Yes? Yes.
And I think, a lot of times in that gap between the knowing and the doing, what we want to do is help someone go from a place of emotional reactivity to intentional reflective action.
Boy, let me interrupt you there. If everyone hears that, just kind of, if you're listening that carefully, picture your life if you had that skill. The one she just mentioned, the ability to move forward in spite of that stuff. Don't tell me that wouldn't be just every bit as valuable as just learning how to, trade stocks or whatever. But if you had that power, that'd be huge. So please continue.
And I think what that often requires is someone being able to put their emotions on ice. Mm-hmm. Because when we act in a very emotional state, a lot of times those decisions in the moment are not the ones that are going to serve us in the long term. In the moment, when we are very, very emotional, it is hard for us to access, think about, envision the person we are going to be down the road. And that, when we think about making prudent financial decisions, that's ultimately what we have to do. And it's hard because we aren't getting that feedback for the choices we're making today. We will feel the natural consequences of that down the road. But when we aren't getting the feedback right now, that can make it a lot harder for people.
We have a saying in our family that's kind of fun. I got this from my friend Blair Singer. He says, when emotion goes up, intelligence goes down. And so we try to have emotional awareness. I don't know if it's intelligence, but we might say, I think our emotion's getting up. And in your own life, you might think about when you said something you regretted. You might go to your spouse and say, you know what, sweetie, I really didn't mean that. I was just upset. Or, I really didn't mean to get carried away with this referee in the basketball game. I just, I was really, really jacked up at the moment, or I was really excited, or I was overly excited, or I overstepped my bounds. Usually when someone commits a crime, it's a crime of passion. People don't kill people out of intelligence. They kill people because they feel bad. People aren't unfaithful to their spouse because they thought it through and thought, well, this will be good for my marriage. They do it because they got caught up in a moment. And so this is a huge thing. So let's try. So with this backdrop and this understanding and this context and appreciation of our duality of logic, brain, and emotional tendencies, let's talk about COVID now. Let's steer this conversation into COVID. What is the psychological, what have you seen in your field? This started probably around in March, late February, where this really started changing our lives. What have you seen in with your boots on the ground in terms of how COVID-19 is affecting us emotionally and our decisions financially?
Well, I think across the board, there is really an uptick in anxiety, and I think that has financial anxiety specifically, but also in life. This pandemic has really stripped people from a sense of control.
Mm-hmm.
I think it, in some ways, it's created things, but maybe more than create, it reveals things. When we go through a difficult time, sometimes that pulls away kind of the blanket and the layers of what was already there and brewing underneath the surface. So I think people have had to really confront and face some difficult things. And the truth is, people are dealing with uncertainty on lots of levels in their lives. They've had to make a lot of changes. Healthier ways of maybe coping, such as exercise, changes to eating habits, those kinds of things have been upended for people, and social support. So a lot of those things that feed people psychologically have also been disrupted. Now we add to this, and we are speaking now in August 2020, there's this added layer of what kind of timeline are we looking at? I think there was, back in the spring, there was a period of time where people thought, well, maybe this is going to be a sprint. But over time, people have realized, okay, this is no sprint. This is a marathon I did not sign up for and I did not train for. But people don't know, am I on mile 13? Or am I on mile 24?
And is the race, and as I hit mile 26, is the race really a 60-mile race? Are they going to move the finish line out, right? The uncertainty is incredible.
Exactly. And it keeps changing.
Yeah.
And when we are in an anxious state, our body is wired for survival.
Mm-hmm.
So when our brain perceives threat on some level, we get anxious, and then a series of actions occur within our body and our mind to get us ready to fight, flee, or freeze.
Or buy toilet paper. Lots and lots of toilet paper we'll buy when we feel this way, right? We'll go and we'll buy all the toilet paper we can possibly buy when we're in this state, correct?
Yeah, because we perceive scarcity. There's not going to be enough. So then we fixate on that and we behave in a way that really doesn't fit with what is actually true and what is actually real. And we then take cues from the people around us. Well, if everyone else is speaking, it's kind of like the market. Well, if everyone else is doing this, maybe I need to jump on board. And then we start taking our signals from the people and places that are not going to help us in the end. So, but when we think about anxiety from a financial perspective, what that can do for someone is really trip them up, because if you become overactive, when people are lacking a sense of control in multiple areas of their life, sometimes they grasp at something and they're like, well, I feel like I should just do something. So then if they're worried, well, maybe if I'm making more movements or jumps in and out of the market, that gives me a false sense of control. Some people freeze, and then they are just paralyzed.
Yeah.
So the steps that they need to be taken in their life to move forward, they are unable to do that. And that's problematic as well, because you need, in a time like this, you really need to be connected to a sense of agency as well. And then some people fight, and that's not going to serve you as well. So I think it's going back to what we were talking about, self-awareness. There's a lot of power in being able to first observe the state you are in, and then understand when I am in this state. Sometimes I'll talk with people about picturing in your mind an emotional thermometer.
Mm-hmm.
First observe, what is the label of the emotion, but then look at the intensity. And be honest with yourself. If you are in an 8, 9, 10 range, you need to wait until you cool down to make better decisions in a less heated state. So I think that's really important as well.
And it is, when you talk about observing, that's an important word, because observing doesn't mean it's changing. Acceptance is a big part of this, because people want to feel differently. We're trying to get to a place where we feel better. And the reality of it is this fear is warranted. I mean, look, the coronavirus has killed people, so the fight or flight response is triggered. It's justified. And from a financial standpoint, when we look at, anyone that understands money, you look at what's happening fiscally and in the monetary policy of just the United States, let alone the world, there are justifications for saying, hey, I might want to learn something, I want to do something. But I will tell you, in my family, and I don't know what the future will hold, I've just got to say that if I also take the time to observe, I might be able to find a space where I say, well, are there opportunities on me? Is there anything good about this? And it's hard to you want to be empathetic. Empathetic people don't build silver linings. So I have empathy for the person struggling. Mm-hmm. I would add to that and say, we the last, March, April, May, June, and July for my family, that 5 months has been one of the best 5 months we've ever had, because we looked at this. Are there any opportunities here? For example, the kids got kicked out of school, and so we thought, oh, now we have to homeschool. And we said, well, wait a minute. We get to try out homeschool. We get to see I've never seen any parent homeschool his kid and say, we made a mistake. Never seen it happen one time. It says, let's see why they like this. We have loved having this opportunity to be more involved with our children. We haven't had a lot of friends over, but we've grown together as a family. We've had to we have so much better planning of our household right now, and where we go and what we do, and the deliberateness in it. We feel closer as a family. So there are some positives you can find in this, and I think that helps the emotions too, that it's not all negative all the time.
Mindset is so important, and when you shift from I have to I get to, even that subtle shift in language is so powerful. And, we don't have to be Pollyanna-ish. There are a lot of hard things right now in the world, and there are a lot of beautiful things. And it can be really hard holding a cohesive picture of the world, of our experience, of other people. But when we can acknowledge the hard alongside of the good, that is a sign and a marker of psychological health. And I think that's really important. So really harnessing the power of shifting your focus and attention now on what is within your control, because it is a recipe for anxiety when people spin and expend lots of time and energy and take responsibility for things that are ultimately outside of their control. So it's really important right now to be clear what is not in your control. Use the time and energy you have on the things that are, and really exercise the agency you have.
I've heard two things. I heard you say two things, and I hate to interrupt, but I get nervous that people might miss it. You said two things. Number one, you kind of gave the serenity prayer, right? God grant me the wisdom to see what I can control and what I can't, or, the serenity and to know the difference, to accept what I can't control and control what I can. There's serenity in that. And then the first thing you said was when things are, I want to instead of I have to. And when you said that, I had a flashback to the 1980 hockey team that beat the Russians. And the Russians were like undefeatable. Mm-hmm. And the coach walked in, and that's the best pregame speech, because you talked about mindset to overcome great resistance. And that coach put those kids in a mindset that was unbelievable. And he walked in, the first thing he said in that pregame speech, he said, great moments are born with great opportunity. And that's what you have here today, boys. It isn't that you have to play the Russians. You get to play the Russians. You have the opportunity to be a hero for your family right now. You have the opportunity to become more organized right now. You have the opportunity to serve your neighbors in your community and be an example and keep your head right now. You have the opportunity to be a father, a husband, a wife, a family member, a teammate, a leader, a business owner. You have a chance to shine, because great moments are born with great opportunities, and you have the chance to be your very, very best when the world is at their very, very worst. And so those two things were huge. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. That's not what a good podcast guy does, but your insights are so on point that I just have to agree. So sorry about that. So serenity of knowing what we can control and what we can't, and also the mindset of I get to instead of I have to will be huge things, right?
And I agree. I think right now there is an opportunity, if we go back to thinking about this financially, there's an opportunity like never before for people to create financial anti-fragility in their life. Because I think a lot of things have been revealed to them. But developing the anti-fragility now requires awareness. So looking at doing an honest assessment, learning how to be more self-reflective, really connecting to that agency, and then taking the action that is needed.
Absolutely fantastic. I love your word anti-fragility. And I'll tell you, if you listen to podcasts, I'll help you with the gap between ignorance and knowledge. I'll teach you a little bit about money. JoyLere.com, check her out, and you can learn about how, the other side of that, right? How do you do the behavior side of this? This is absolutely fantastic. Tell me a little bit about this. Let's say and we're getting close to the end of our time. You've been so gracious, and I have to say this as well. Joy, in fact, you might tell a story. Sometimes you just know people are good people because of what they're willing to do. Joy had some disruption in the last 24 hours, and she got on the podcast and said, Andy, I committed to it. I'm going to do it. Tell that little story to our listeners, because I think it says a lot about who you are in wanting to do the podcast. Just tell them where you're doing this from, and it says a lot about you, Joy, I think.
Well, Andy, I am, along like everyone else, a card-carrying member of the human race. And so I'm human here in 2020, which, none of the things we have experienced were anywhere on my bingo card that I got in January. So the where I got last night that is not on my card was a literal firestorm over here. My husband and I live on base with our twin 2-year-olds, and we were evacuated due to the fires in California in the middle of the night. So I came to a hotel with my kids. My husband had to stay behind, so I have a friend with my kids right now, so I'm sitting in my car. So if people are overhearing any kind of background noise, that's what's going on.
I haven't heard a peep.
That was important to me.
I haven't heard a peep, and I said, Joy, we can do this another time. She says, Andy, I made a commitment. It's important to me that I fulfill I said, Joy, we can do it another time. And so drop by joylere.com, because, that's the type of person she is. She's here to serve. She's here to help, and awesome stuff. Let's say someone's really down. People can have really thoughts of self-harm in times like this. They can have thoughts of quitting in times like this. They have a hard time summoning that energy and seeing it as an opportunity for financial strength. Could you just speak to the person who's down right now?
Absolutely. I think, first of all, you are not alone. This is impacting everyone on multiple complex levels in many ways, and it's so important to have grace and compassion with yourself and just allow yourself to feel however you're feeling for however long you're feeling it, and know that you don't have to do this alone. Just because there is maybe social distance, that doesn't mean you need to have relational and emotional distance. I think now more than ever, this is a time for people to be reaching out this is the time for people to be in therapy and for people to be working with a financial advisor. So that's something I would encourage people to really think about. But I think one of in behavioral finance, there's a list of kind of common cognitive biases that we think about. And one of them is this idea of recency. So our brain has this mentality where we think that whatever is right now is all that there is going to be. And I think as humans, we experience that with our emotions. It's almost, and we feel a sense of impermanence. And we live in a one-season state. So I think it's really important to hold on to the fact that whatever you are feeling right now, whatever you are experiencing, this is not going to be indefinite. Your brain, because of how emotionally intense this time is, sometimes it can be hard to imagine it being different, but not every day is going to feel like today.
Wonderful counsel, wonderful words. Joy, you've been so gracious with your time. We've gone a little bit over what we scheduled, so I appreciate that extra time. Drop by her website. Anything else you'd like to share, resources, things that you offer before we close?
You can feel free to visit my website. I have a financial anxiety toolkit that people can access if that would be helpful to them. I'm happy to connect with you on Twitter. My handle is JoyLere, PSYD. I'm also active on LinkedIn and share content there, and have a blog that lives on my website as well.
I'm on your website actually right now. You're one click away from the Unlock the Financial Anxiety Toolkit, and it's a 4-step framework for quelling financial panic, and what a valuable tool that is. So drop by our website, click on that download button to get the Financial Anxiety Toolkit. Joy, you're just a joy to talk to. I'll tell you what, I wish we had 2 hours. This is such an important, it's more than important, it's vital. It's a vital part of success as an investor. And what a great opportunity you have today that maybe COVID was the thing that said, I'm going to get financially organized. I'm going to get some good coaches in my life. I'm going to get people who are going to be there to support me, both in my education, but also in my emotional education. It could be a great opportunity for you. So Joy, thank you so much for, really for braving the fires in California. We wish everyone well out there as they deal with that. Seems like this happens almost every year, and we just feel so bad for those folks that are displaced and have to be evacuated. We hope your home is safe, and we're glad that you and your kids are safe, and we just wish you the best. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Andy.
All right, you've been listening to the Cashflow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner. This is What Investing's Made Simple. Hope you've enjoyed our conversation with Joy Lere. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Cashflow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner. For more information on investing made easy, go to thecashflowacademy.com.